In our last episode of the Warhammer Fantasy Race overview, we explored the Isle of Ulthuan and the story of the High Elves' ascendance to power. The armies of the High Elves were legendary for their martial prowess and swiftness of the wind itself. Resilient spellcasters and noble warriors led these shining armies to war, always with pride in their balance stricken between lethality and beauty. Welcome to the fourth in our video series on the races of the Warhammer world, where we will cover the High Elven armies. For 5,000 years we have defended our shores from all who would conquer us. Even in our darkest hour, when our own kin rose up and betrayed us, we fought with such determination and martial skill that they were vanquished. But before you do this, you must understand how to command your army, to conduct its many diverse parts into a symphony of destruction, to weave the potent sorceries of your battle mages with the rain of deadly shafts from our archers, to form an impregnable line of spears from which the armoured might of your cavalry can leap to smash the foe. And if you learn all these things, then and only then, you will be a true prince. Recounted by Unthwei Windrider, Herald of the Phoenix King. The armies of Ulthuan were led by many commanders from diverse roles within the nation. Nobles and princes represented the bloodlines of prestige from the 10 kingdoms, while the Handmaiden of the Everqueen and the Anointed of Asurion were chosen from only the most talented and disciplined elves. Scholars such as dragon mages and lore masters supported the armies with a near-endless array of magical boons. At their command was a lengthy roster of infantry, cavalry, chariots, monsters, war weapons, and illustrious lords. Much of the speed of high elven infantry and even armoured cavalry was due to their mastery of smithing Ithelmar, or sky silver in the tongue of the elves. The veins of Ithelmar were found only within the tallest volcanic mountain ranges near Vorl's Anvil, and they were the envy of both Elven and Dwarven smiths. Not only was Ithelmar armour ultra-lightweight, but it also never tarnished, always keeping its edge, and was as durable as steel. The most exquisitely decorated weapons and scale armour belonged to elite units and army commanders. Ithelmar was not the only armour that the High Elves lent their military success to. Dragon armour, forged at the same shrine as Ithelmar, was famous for having enchantments powerful enough to repel dragon breath and all other fire attacks. The backbone of the Elven army was the citizen militia. Cities and settlements of Ulthuan were required to maintain a force of archers and spearmen, under the leadership of a sentinel for the spearmen and a hawkeye for the archers. Once 20 or 30 years' experience in archery was attained, the High Elf warriors continued their martial service as spearmen. These units were numerous, and they were a reliable pillar of the High Elven armies. Some citizen militias became specialized infantry, diversified by the needs and unique strengths of the different kingdoms. In Lothern, a massive force of 10,000 Sea Guard was formed in the largest city of Aitane to ensure order was maintained within the busy trade hub at all times. This hybrid unit balanced the aspects of both archer and spearman, and was as effective on battlements as it was on the decks of elven warships. In the Kingdom of Avalon, the Sisters of Avalon were those maids chosen by the Everqueen herself to watch over the sacred places of the kingdom and guard the wooded realm. Only the most gifted of elf maids were welcomed into the ranks and were expected to mirror the Everqueen's embodiment of the ideal and perfect. Unlike the archers of other kingdoms, their bows fired mystical bolts of cerulean flame. Though the sisters were primarily ranged, they did not shy away from the fray and would valiantly charge into a fight when required. In the northern kingdom of Trace, the elves that lived amongst the wildwood and had proved themselves as capable hunters became the White Lions. Named after the pelt that they earned from the same beast they defeated in single combat, the White Lions of Trace were axe-wielding damage dealers on the battlefield and experts in animal handling. In the entire history of Ulthuan, there was never a noble or prince abandoned once entrusted to their care. Within the inner territories of Ulthuan, the Kingdom of Safari was also known to foster its own elite infantry unit. The Swordmasters of Hueth were the guardians of the White Tower of Hueth. It was the grandest vault of magical knowledge in the world, and the Swordmasters protected it with unwavering devotion under the direction of the High Lawmaster. These warriors were such masters in the art of swordplay that they were known to deflect arrows mid-combat and slay an enemy with a single touch. but not all warriors of Ulthuan were viewed equally as perfect, gleaming subjects of the Phoenix throne. Rumoured to have been tainted by the Witch King in some circles of gossip, the Shadow Warriors were descendants of elves from Naggarith. During the Civil War, they proved incorruptible to the temptations of the Cult of Pleasure and remained loyal to the third Phoenix King, Caledor I. During a skirmish, they served as cloaked assassins, subtle scouts, and fleet-footed warriors. The most prestigious rank of infantry belonged to the Elves who protected the Shrine of Asuryan. In war, the Phoenix Guard answered only to the king himself, and were the embodiment of the ruler's will. Silent were these sentinels, bound by a magical oath from which they were never released. Even if they could not speak, the oath blessed them with divine protection. Neither arrow nor blade could hope to pierce the shimmering protective glow, and they marched with the burning gaze of unshakable faith in the Creator God. High Elven cavalry were some of the finest in the Warhammer world, even rivaling some of the noble knights of Bretonnia. Ithelmar Barding was light and afforded the nimble elven steeds unhindered movement. Most renowned for their agility were the Illyrian Reavers. They were especially resilient and survived in the wilds between ambushes. They rode tirelessly and secretively in enemy territory and were a lethal nuisance to any raiders ignorant of their presence. High Elves did not ride their mounts exclusively on land. From the mists of Yvresse soared the Knights of Torgaval, aerial warriors carried by the wings of fearsome griffins and majestic eagles. In spite of the misty landscape of their homeland, these warriors were perfectly skilled in maneuvering in the poor visibility of their native skies. The nobles of Yvresse were generally hesitant to fight in the sky due to the dangers posed by the mists, but the Knights of Torgaval were a bold exception. Unlike the archers and spearmen of the citizen militia, the Silver Helms were recruited only from the bloodlines of Ulthuan nobility. The riders were adorned with tall, conical helmets called Ithiltain, and rode to war with shining lances. With each demon slain or heroic deed accomplished, their tall helmets were decorated with ornaments of valor. The highest honors achievable were the eagle feathers of the High Helm, which came with a perilous role in seeking out enemy champions and slaying them, no matter how powerful they might be. Dragon Princes were the proudest and most noble of the High Elven Knights, a living echo of an age where elf princes would ride dragons to war. In those days, entire armies could be burnt away with the roaring flames of their behemoth mounts, but since that time the dragons had become few in number. Those that remain slumber deeply and endlessly, but still the Dragon Princes march to war. Through fire and fury, they ride horses clad in dragon armor, seeking out the most dangerous assignments to sate their enormous thirst for glory. Some steeds were assigned to chariots to sweep through enemy lines on the field and in the sky. When the Phoenix King sounded the drums of war, the Tiranoc chariots were often among the first to answer. Armed with bows and arrows, the chariots peppered the enemy lines with volleys to weaken their resolve. Then, when the enemy was wavering, the Tiranoc chariots would charge en masse and destroy the remaining infantry. The chariots from the Kingdom of Trace were pulled not by elven horses, but by the mighty war lions. Where the Tiranoc chariots may have picked at their foe methodically, the lion chariots shredded their way into the fray without hesitation. Axes bashed skulls and cleaved limbs from the chariot platform with unmatched ferocity. From Lothern flew the sky chariots, agile vessels pulled by a swift feather rock and held aloft by a cloud of magic. With 2 mounted bolt throwers, the Skycutters were the preferred aerial unit to scout ahead and take out priority targets from the safety of the sky. The primary siege weapon of the High Elves was known as the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, and when not mounted on Skycutters, they were brought to war as reliable repeating ballistas. Their bolts were crafted from meteoric iron and a staggering 6 feet in length. Enchantments on the weapon enabled the bolts to be thrown at impossible speeds and pierce the thickest armor with ease. The bolt throwers were designed with 2 modes, one to fire single bolts for larger targets, and the other to unleash 6 lesser bolts in a volley to annihilate contesting infantry. For all the beauty of the Elven armies, they were sorely incomplete without the presence of the rare and impressive monsters that fiercely fought at their side to protect Ulthuan. Their most ancient ally in war were the almighty dragons. In Ulthuan they came in 3 primary kinds: the young and eager Sun Dragons, the wiser and experienced Moon Dragons, and the eldest Star Dragons. Frequently were these behemoths ridden into battle by dragon mages or archmages, and easily worth an entire army's measure in strength alone. High in the Anuli Mountains, the High Elves called upon the Great Eagles to swoop down upon enemy artillery with crushing talons, or fly far ahead to scout oncoming warships bound to make landfall on Ulthuan's shores. Like their Elven allies, they were haughty and clever, using their excellent eyesight to examine the movements of prey from many miles away. What High Elven army was complete without the awe-inspiring presence of the magical phoenixes? Dwelling amongst the flame spires around the Shrine of Asuryan, the massive raptors had innate control over fire and frost. When a flame spire phoenix was slain, it could focus the scattered magic in the ashes to be reborn again. Those phoenixes that survived and progressed in age found their fires cooling until they matured into a Frostheart phoenix. This change forced them to leave for the coast of Aetine, for their frigid presence brought great pain to their fiery kin. Some became great war mounts in their final days, but those who left for the mountains lived in exile until they froze solid. The rarest form of phoenix was the arcane variant, believed to be the Wind of Magic Akshi given form. Fire burned around these creatures constantly, at a temperature so intense that not even an arrow could strike its body. They were believed by the High Elves to be the companions of the Creator God himself, and were as much an omen of impending doom as they were a beacon of hope. The lords and heroes of the High Elven armies were proud and cunning, for none would easily follow the leadership of untested minds or unseasoned warriors. Of all of the High Elven leaders, there were some exceptional lords who made their mark upon High Elven history. Hail, bright flower of the goddess, chosen of Isha, dawn's hope and heart's home, the glory of Ulthuan shines in your eyes. Passage from Paean to the Everqueen. Among all the Everqueens to rule, Alarielle was known for timeless beauty that transcended even the harshest battlefield and radiated with power nothing short of magnificent and terrible. Alarielle banished demons with but a touch of her hand and unraveled the bindings of the undead with effortless gestures. During the year of her coronation, the Witch King Malekith invaded Ulthuan. Alarielle was instrumental in the saving of Ulthuan from a dark fate, especially during the tense Battle of Finnevel Plain. In combat, Alarielle was never seen without the Shield Stone of Isha, the Star of Avalon, and the Stave of Avalon. Mortal blows and arrows were deflected using the Shield Stone, while the Stave was a conduit with which the Everqueen could cast potent spells from the living land. The Star of Avalon was a single gem passed down from Anarion to Astarielle, the first Everqueen. It was storied to have been a star from the heavens taken by the goddess Isha and possessed the ability to heal all wounds. By what right do you enter these lands without the permission of Alith, Lord of House Anar, Shadow King of Naggarith? If you come to treat with me, hear my oath to the dead. Nothing is forgotten, nothing is forgiven. Alith, the Shadow King. From the mysterious and shrouded realm of Naggarith hailed Alith, the Shadow King, and the Prince of Naggarith. Alith was the last member of the noble line of House Anar, and was chosen by the Naggarithi Elves after the Witch King Malekith and his rebels fled into the west towards the end of the Civil War. Even with his departure, many Dark Elves remained in Ulthuan, and Alith swore to eradicate all of them. His actions lent him an unnerving reputation for merciless and cruel methods, and many elves began to believe that this made him no better than the Dark Elves he hunted. Alith was a masterful archer, wielding a pale bow forged from metal that glittered in the moonlight. The moonbow was a gift from the goddess Lilith herself and a potent tool to strike fear into the hearts of Dark Elven adversaries. Upon his head was the Shadow Crown, a deceptively simple circlet that could halt time itself and afford Alith a moment to evade harm. Even if the Shadow King had been stricken in a fight, the Stone of Midnight he carried would explode in an impossibly thick veil of shadow and torment his foes with nightmares, their failures, and visions of their own deaths. No more, good friend. I think you have proven yourself worthy of our order. You are setting down a path that can lead you to great glory or great tragedy. There is nothing more for you to study in the ways of fighting. Now you must study your own heart. Loremaster Belanir, while teaching Eltharion. There was only one High Elven general who launched an attack upon Nagarond and lived to tell of his conquests. Eltharion, the Prince of Ivres and Warden of Tor Ivres, was one of the greatest High Elven lords, known for many successful assaults on Dark Elf and Greenskin invaders. Grim and firm was his ruling hand, but the Ivresians loved their prince dearly and undyingly. The Elf Lord rode upon a griffin named Stormwing, and was a swift killer in any encounter. Eltharion's fang sword was encrusted with runes, and given to him by many previous generations. For strikes at range, he called upon a bow enchanted with elf magic to enhance the accuracy. As Warden of Tor Ivres, he wore the ceremonial winged helm proudly, and closely guarded the Talisman of Hueth for the glimpse of magical knowledge it gave. I walk through the dreaming halls, and I feel change in the wind. In the rhythm of their slumber, I see omens. Mithynir tells me that he too feels his brethren swimming towards consciousness. I dwell in hope and fear. Hope that my dragon brothers and sisters will shake off their grand slumber to rise again, and that once more all the lords of Caledor will ride to battle on the backs of dragons as of old. And I fear that if we do, when we do, it will be our last ride. Imrik, Dragon Prince of Caledor. The Prince of Caledor, Imrik, was the Lord of Dragons, and one of the last descendants of the Phoenix King Caledor the Conqueror. He was given the name, as were all of the descendants of the ancient ruler, and was one of the few who could wake the dragons of Ulthuan during times of great need. Mithynir, one of the last dragons of Ulthuan, carried Imrik from conflict to conflict as a fanatically loyal steed. Imrik wore the armor of Caledor, an artifact set passed down by the masters of the house for over 4,000 years. The legendary Star Lance of Imrik was forged from the heart of a fallen star and found no armor it couldn't pierce. When Imrik and Mithynir rode for war, the skies roared with the sounding of the dragon horn, an enchanted war horn crafted from the last enchantments of a dying fire drake after the conclusion of the Battle of the Glade of Tears. Tree Cutter. Chael would find your neck before you could pull that shiny toothpick from its sheath. Korhil's response to Tyrion, teasing each other in good humor before the Phoenix King Finubar. From Trace, the hunter captain of the White Lions, served the Phoenix King as general and leader of Ulthuan's honor guard. The White Lions claimed Korhil to be the strongest elf in Ulthuan, and was even more exceptionally dexterous and graceful. This reputation came even before his ascendancy to captain, for he had slain the great lion Tyrandis, a mutated and brutal creature tainted by the warping magic of chaos. Though dozens of his kin had tried to fell the beast, only Korhil claimed the trophy of Tyrandis' pelt. The pelt provided the elf with magical enchantments, and with his battle axe Chael, he was a quick and devastating force on the front line. Our fate brings us here, and our fate sends us home. Forth now, for Ulthuan, and the day of our destiny! With moon, staff and sword, I am master of magics and shaper of fates. Destiny beckons, and I must heed the call. Prince Tyrion, defender of Ulthuan, and Teclis, lawmaster of Hoeth and archmage of Ulthuan. And finally, the twin brothers Teclis and Tyrion were the most storied and revered of the legendary lords of the High Elves. The High Elf princes were two sides of the same coin and heirs of Anarion. Where Tyrion was a master of the blade and defender of Ulthuan, Teclis was a master of magic and the lawmaster of Hoeth. Ulthuan bards sang of their splendor at length, for Tyrion was celebrated as the incarnation of the first Phoenix King, while Teclis was the manifestation of Caledor Dragon Tamer. Both, however, were loyal to the Phoenix King without question. As the warrior prince, Tyrion wore the dragon armor of Anarion and wielded Sunfang, an ancient burning sword forged to slay demons. It was said that if Tyrion were to perish in a fight, the heart of Avalon given to him by Ever-Queen Alarielle would break and reverse death itself to revive him. While Tyrion was the superior swordsman, Teclis did carry a blade forged by his own hand. It crackled with energy and tore enemies limb from limb with the magic sealed within. But more often did he call upon the Scroll of Hoeth and the Moonstaff of Lilith, enchanted items with the ability to unleash a storm of magic at the cost of Teclis' physical strength. He could replace his lost strength with potions, concoctions he had carried since his early and sickly childhood. For an enemy of the High Elves to gaze upon their advancing armies, it would be a moment of awe, wonder, and terror at their martial prowess and elegance. Their foes were plentiful in the Warhammer world, with armies that may have lacked refinement, but did not lack the strength to match the Elves. More videos on the races of the Warhammer fantasy world are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.